Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. This one's going to be a positive one. We are taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour out on the road next week. I'll be giving away these Show Me Maryland lottery tickets all throughout August. I'm doing 31 crab cakes, 31 breweries in 31 days. It's all brought to you by our friends at Window Nation. I'm getting some new windows in a couple weeks and free door as well. That's the deal this month. Our friends at Goodwill as well. I'm cleaning my closet out for some summer cleaning. And the Restaurant Association of Maryland are going to be featuring 31 local places, kind of like little WNST is local. This guy's not local, but he was. He was here for like the
5
goodish,
years.
the Burt Jones stuff and all of that. Clark Judge joins us, the man, the myth, the legend, Talk of Fame Network, and the Hall of Fame, and it's Hall of Fame week, and it's football week, and you and I were bending the elbow with Jimmy Irsay and the capital of the free world. And how are you? And happy football season to you, Clark.
Yeah, I'm great. It was great to see you in New York City. Loved that time there. Had a wonderful time with lots of people we saw there from the NFL and outside the NFL. But that was fun. It was great to see you and a lot of unexpected guests. That was wonderful. And yeah, I'm doing well. I mean, it's funny. It's been a long time since I've been in Baltimore. I left in 1984, but I love that place. I talk about it all the time. And it does feel like I'm kind of from there. I was there only 5 years, but I had a wonderful time. And I've got great friends, including you down there. So I miss it. And I always love talking to people from Baltimore.
Well, look, it's football season. Let's start with the hot burner, which is Lamar, right? And value of OTAs and not showing up. And is this a negotiation? Is it not? How crazy the money has gotten, right? So I'm releasing Purple Rain 2 this week. So it's given me an opportunity. It hadn't been 10 years yet, right? I mean, Flacco is still yesterday's news here. They don't think he's cool anymore, even though I still think it's kind of cool, right? Yeah. So I went back into the book and I saw in chapter 8, I had talked to him and I had talked to Bisciotti, and I wrote a really nice chapter that kind of got picked up about how Bisciotti cornered him before the season and said, take this money, take care of your family. You're being crazy here. And Joe wanted no part of it. Joe said to me over an iced tea up in Audubon 3 weeks after he won the Super Bowl, he's like, I knew I was going to get more money. You always get more money. The guy after me will get more money and there'll be more money. And I looked, the number that he was making in 2011, $6.5 million.
Yeah, right.
Lamar's about to get 50, but it hasn't been that long. I mean, this thing is escalated, right?
Oh, it's gone off the rails. I mean, it really has. And it's TV money and also a lot of things through the internet and streaming and all sorts of other sources that the NFL is going to. And they just are making more and more money, and they're going to have to share it. They're going to have to share it with whom? Players. And so everyone's going to be happy, right? And the players are getting a lot more money than they did in Joe Flacco's, year. I think that was 2012. And I remember when he gambled on that, and I thought he should have taken the money. Then he goes to the playoffs and he throws 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, has a great Super Bowl, and they win the Super Bowl. I mean, he gambled, he won. It's kind of doing what Aaron Judge is doing in baseball right now. But I look back at that, and that was a real risk, I thought, for Flacco. But you look in today's world, you saw what Kyler Murray just got. I mean, what's Kyler Murray done? I mean, Kyler Murray, he's going to average, $46 million a year?
What's Deshaun Watson done? What hasn't he done?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I really hesitate to get into that because of all the ramifications. I don't know what the Cleveland Browns are thinking. I expect the NFL to weigh in at some point on this. And I know you and I have talked about this before, but as I said a long time ago, if it were one or two women, I'd give him possibly the benefit of the doubt. But when it's 24 and more, I mean, God, no. I mean,
well, the Texans wrote a check. They settled.
Can all those people be wrong? And the answer is no, they can't. And so I'm really interested to see what the NFL does here and what the Cleveland Browns do here. I had no expectation that kind of deal was going to happen. It's fully guaranteed contract. I don't understand that and what they gave away for him, and to bring that guy into the situation without his civil matters being resolved. Anyway.
The fact that 3 other teams were lining up. I mean, it pissed Matt Ryan off so much that, it cost the Falcons their quarterback for real, right? But Carolina, New Orleans, they were all ready to take this on. And more than that, Clark, it's impossible to talk about this Lamar situation without talking about Steve Bisciotti and his money and what this does to this negotiation, what it did to the Kyler Murray situation, but what The other owners, I don't want to say they colluded, but let's just say they shared information back in your era to make sure that this sort of rogue nonsense didn't happen. That what did Art used to say? We're a room full of Republicans that get together and vote socialism. Is that what he said? I think. But in general, this is a mistake of the Cleveland Browns that is really, really hampering Steve's ability to get a deal done with Lamar. I believe.
Maybe I think it's sort of a rogue negotiations. You look at it, the Cleveland Browns. What are they doing? They've lost their minds. I mean, come on, they've lost their minds. So the Kyler Murray situation, was that fully guaranteed? No, it wasn't fully guaranteed. Like half of it's guaranteed. It's an astounding number for somebody who really hasn't done anything. And when I say that, I got to be careful because he's an outstanding talent and a terrific quarterback when he plays. You know, he to me is an injury waiting to happen. And when he was drafted, I thought, boy, I know he's talented, but he is so small. I understand when I watch him, he's electric. But when he gets hit, what happens? And we see what happens. He gets hurt, and that's what I worry about with Lamar Jackson. I mean, you look at his numbers. The last 2 or 3 years, they've been descending numbers. He got hurt last year for what? 4 games, missed 4 games, and the touchdowns were down, the interceptions were up. I worry about that. But then Lamar Jackson goes, hey, why worry? Like you said, Joe Flacco went. The money's going up. It always goes up. It's going up. There's no question. He's going to get a huge contract, and he doesn't seem to be too worried about it. And that's because he probably shares what Joe Flacco did 10 years before him. Yeah, I'm going to get a big contract no matter what. So we'll see what happens this year. A lot of people think he's going to have a monster season. I'm skeptical. I just don't know because he's taken so many hits over the years. I just don't know what's going to happen. And I look at the recent history, as I said, and the numbers are somewhat revealing to me. They're going in the opposite direction.
Anytime I talk about Lamar, I get the charge, right, from everybody, because what we've established with this kid is that he has fans. He has fans.
Sure.
I'm a fan of the Ravens, right? I need the Ravens to do well. Lamar goes and plays for the Falcons. I'm not a Lamar fan anymore. I'm a Ravens fan, right? So part of this is it good business? Is it not? And
that's right.
Somebody wrote on my page, and I thought this was a very thoughtful take. He's like, I love Lamar. I love everything about Lamar, but I don't think that's a safe contract to guarantee him $175 million over 5 years or whatever it's going to be. That we lived through Flacco. We lived through what a $22 million quarterback looks like when the rest of the team can't be put together. And in the salary cap era, when other than Tom Brady, and I'm pretty convinced there was chicanery going on there financially. You'll never convince me that cheaters don't lie and liars don't cheat. But in the case of legitimacy for what a quarterback means to the salary cap at 18, 20, 22% and eating that up, and what you need around any quarterback, whether it's Tom Brady or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes is going to find out that his contract's going to lessen the team around him. That certainly was something here that we lived through with Flacco, where when you don't draft well and guys don't stay healthy and things don't work out and the quarterback's 30, it's different than the quarterback being 24.
No question about it. And the reason is you're not operating under the first contract. You've got a mega deal. And so if you strike it rich with that young quarterback, and the best example I can remember is Russell Wilson with Seattle. So they hit it rich with Seattle. Seattle goes to the Super Bowl in 2013. They win. They beat the Denver Broncos, the highest scoring team of all time, beat Peyton Manning. They go back to 2014, go back again to repeat. Should have won. They'd given the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the one, but they didn't, all right? But they were a force. The next dynasty waiting to happen. What happened? Russell Wilson got a big deal because it was a second contract. Suddenly, the rest of the team started going elsewhere. You lost the Legion of Boom. You lost some key playmakers. And then the Seattle Seahawks became a good playoff team, not a great one, and a descending team. And now Russell Wilson's not even there. That happens in the NFL. You see it. I saw it with San Francisco when they were working with Colin Kaepernick on his rookie deal. We know what happened with the Kaepernick situation, but they had talent galore. They had a ton of talent. They all left. They basically all left. And you see now with Kansas City, Tyreek Hill's gone. And now Orlando Brown's holding out for more money. That happens when you have that success. But when you sink all that money into one position, as you're kind of forced to do, otherwise, what happens? You lose the quarterback, and now you're gambling on, you don't have Lamar Jackson. What are you going to do? You got nothing, right? So,
well, the Ravens have bigger than that with Ronnie Stanley's contract, Humphrey's contract.
That's right.
Where Peters is, which isn't but it's there, and
but that's
these
why
guys
it's a business
performing.
deal. It's a business deal. That's why. And so how much money do you sink into that position? It is the most important position on the team, but at what cost? And the cost tends to be the players on the edge, on the outside. Initially, it can be some of those peripheral guys, anyway from 40 to 53, somewhere down in there, special teams guys. Then suddenly find starters going. They're leaving because they're getting more money elsewhere. And now you don't have the people who are the core, or some of the people who are the core of a Super Bowl team. And I've seen it time and again. As I said, my best example is Seattle, because that was a great team. So was the 49ers at that era, was a really good team, but they fell apart pretty quickly.
Clark Judge is our guest. Should I say you're a writer of writings of all of these years? Tell me what you're up to these days and where folks can find you. It's Hall of Fame week. I think of you. And when I don't think of you, I just run into you randomly in New York.
I'm on summer vacation was what I'm up to. Was doing the Talk of Fame Network for 9 years with Ron Borges and Rick Gosselin. And we dissolved it this summer for the right reasons. We just felt like we had done everything we could. And so we said, we're going to dissolve it. I think Ron wants to do books. Rick wants to, he's got some issues he needs to take care of.
You guys had a Hall of Famer on almost every week, and you talked history of the game. I mean, it was just incredible archive of 9 years of.
It was, and I loved it. It was great.
200 years of NFL knowledge, right?
But literally. I said I want to continue doing it, but I'm taking a break here. Now I do a podcast with Ira Kaufman. It's the Eye Test for Two, and Ira Kaufman's a Hall of Fame voter, and we get some of those same guests on there. We get a lot of people with notoriety, Hall of Famers and current and former players who everyone, all your listeners would know of. And so that's fun for me. But I want to get back to doing something in terms of historical perspectives, because there's so many guys from the past. It's funny when you mentioned Burt Jones. I mean, there's a good example. I was just talking about Burt Jones recently to somebody with a seemingly NFL background, and he goes, I don't know who he is. I've never heard of him. I went, Burt Jones. Wow.
Somebody did an analysis. Was it Pro Football Outsiders or like Schatz or one of those guys that 76 Burt Jones year is like against any of the great NFL years of any player, that Burt Jones is 70. And I was, my dad took me to those games and fell in love with the Colts that year.
Put the Colts on his shoulders and carried him. And he was so charismatic. I love watching him play. It's funny because a friend of mine was saying, I know who your favorite player is of all time. And I said, yeah, I know who my favorite player is too. It's that guy right there. Right? That's my favorite player. But I said, who do you think my second favorite player is? He goes, I know that, Burt Jones. I said, yeah, because I love watching him play. He could do everything, and he carried that team. And they were so much fun to watch. And then they weren't. I mean, I did a story, I think 2 years ago. Anyway, when Oliver Luck retired, and basically saying that Oliver Luck was this generation's Burt Jones. I mean, he carried that team. They were the Colts, took them to the playoffs, didn't have a lot of success in the playoffs. Burt Jones, I don't think won a playoff game, but they didn't have a lot of success, but was a great quarterback while he was there. Had he just extended that career, he was going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. Burt Jones, same thing. You remember in the 2007 Super Bowl when Belichick arrived in Arizona Sunday, they're playing the Giants. We know what happened, but right that Sunday, I thought he's as loose as I've ever seen him. And somebody asked him, who's the greatest quarterback you've ever seen? And he said, the best passer. Now he mentioned that best passer I've ever seen is Burt Jones. And that was looking back on an era of John Elway, Dan Marino, people like he had Tom Brady on his team. He said Burt Jones, and he explained why. And I thought, boy, we looked around the room and people said, what? Burt Jones was a great player.
Clark Judge covered Burt Jones, covered John Elway, and still covering the NFL and talking NFL. And you can find him out on the interwebs. So I'm going to ask this because I'm going to get back to writing. I'm a writer first, right? There's some people that say I don't cover the Ravens anymore. I'm going to get back. True. I want to write a column. What would a column look like in the modern era? I'm asking everyone who ever was a columnist to writing off of a football game on a Sunday or a Sunday night for the Monday paper, or writing a column on Thursday off the Wednesday press conference about what the Ravens should do this week or what's going on or the vibe of the team. That art form's like, it's happened so quickly, but I can't name columnists anymore in the way that we used to tie them to newspapers and say, well, Sally Jenkins is still doing it. Great. But Mitch Albom isn't. And, lots of people aren't. And if they are, you're not finding it or you're not seeing it in whatever way. People have blogs now. That's different. I'm talking about something with some balls,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Something with some teeth, something with some wisdom, something with some insight, something that is a must read, a column off of a game.
yeah, and the reason you can't name anyone, Nestor, or many people, Sally Jenkins certainly is a terrific reporter and a terrific columnist, but because there's so many platforms now, there's so many platforms, so you can't find them. You're inundated with all this stuff, and I really firmly believe that in journalism we don't report as much as we try to provoke now, and provoking is our columns. Columns are all about provoking the reader. You want to get a reaction. And I remember saying to somebody one time at a place where I worked, he disagreed with me, but I still believe it to this day. I said, if Roger Goodell retired tomorrow and we got 1 million hits, and I wrote a column on Tom Brady's hairdo, and I got 12 million hits, you'd much prefer the 12 million hits to Tom Brady than to Roger Goodell, even though the Goodell story had a lot of news value, and the Brady story was something about his hair or maybe his relationship with his wife. But that's where we are. We're provoked to certain areas, and I think with columnists, I still know of some people that I will pay attention to, but it's fewer and fewer, and it's because, as you said, the whole idea of columns and stories, newspaper reporting has changed. It used to be when we had newspapers, when people read newspapers, you had a game story and then you had a columnist. You had Al Goldstein and then you had the game story. You had Bob Mazel and then you had the game story. And the game story is pretty much, this is what happened. Well, everyone knows what happened by Sunday night. And so you don't really get game stories anymore. Reporters are generally columnists. Everyone's a columnist, because what they'll tell you is, go in and give me your opinion of what you saw. So everyone's a columnist. Some are better at it than others. So in any case,
But I think a column had a certain tone and a certain
it did
writing about it, and it didn't have I or me in it in general, right?
Yeah, that's right.
As a written form, if I go back and read great columns, it speaks of things, not necessarily to things, and certainly not like Bill Simmons would write.
Right.
Change that format to some degree at ESPN. And Peter King with Monday Morning Quarterback, things that I think, right? I loved when that came online 20 years ago. I think Peter was revolutionary, but I think in that we've lost the art of an 18 to 24 inch. I don't even know how many words that is. What's that? 2,500 words, 2,000. I don't even know how many words it is, right?
It's more like, I guess, 1,000, something like that. But
1,000 words. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but I think you're absolutely right, and the internet has sort of contributed to that, because, Nestor, when you say 18, 24 inches, I remember when I first started working for Fox Sports, I said, well, I'm going to give you a 20-inch story, and the guy said, I don't care how long it is. This is the internet. You can write it forever. You can write forever. We don't have inches here.
But do you think 1,000 words is, if you can't do it in 1,000 words, it's not a column?
No, I agree with you. I think the shorter the better. You get to the point, and a lot of things you read today, you'll see. In fact, I looked at the first 3 graphs. And if the writer hasn't gotten to the point in the first 3 graphs, I give up on it, because I want to know where he's going. Or she's going. I want to know where that individual is going. And I think part of the problem is that it used to be that, and again, your listeners going, this guy is old school. Yeah, I'm old school, because there was a way that you were brought up. You went to high schools, colleges, pros. That's what I did. High schools, started out with high schools locally. Then we went to high school.
They threw me out after colleges, and I went on the radio and did pro. So that's cool,
So then I went to
my own little empire here that some people respect.
I did the high school coverage at the Evening Sun. Then I did the University of Maryland with Lefty Driesell. Then I did the Colts. And then the last year I was in Baltimore, they had me do the NFL. And with the NFL, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for it. I was 30 years old at that time. And so I said, that's pushing me too far. No, and do it. So that was a great education for me. Then I went out to San Diego, covered the Chargers for 10 years, San Francisco 49ers for 6 years, and then did columns for Fox and CBS. But it took that length of time. There are a lot of people coming out of school today, and I'm talking about colleges and universities, who said, I want a job, want to cover a pro team, give me a column. What do you know about it? And what we knew in those days that you were talking about was, I could look at a guy like Lee Montville, who is one of my favorites, Paul Zimmerman. I know what a column looks like. Dave Anderson, I know what a good columnist looks like. I know what Jim Murray reads like. I want to be
What
like
is that? I don't want to get Melfi, and I don't want to be interruptive, Clark, but I'm literally taking notes from all of you about this because I want to incorporate it. I'm 53. I got plenty of time left. I have my own company, right? I can do. I want to craft this and try to figure out where that voice would be in the modern era because if the Baltimore Sun came back to life, I'm a 53-year-old in the middle of what would I write in 20 inches in a paper, and what would it look like? Because it would be old fashioned at this point by its very nature, right?
Yeah,
And the way and the voice it would take, it'd be old fashioned.
Well, you started the question about Lamar Jackson. Okay, that tell you, you write a column on Lamar Jackson. You tell me what he should be doing, or what the Ravens should be doing. You tell me that he deserves all the money in the world, or you tell me that no, it's a bad business deal. They should move on. Tell me why, and make it strong. And so make it convincing and support it with as much information as you can, but give me a strong voice. They always talk about a columnist's voice. And I think that's what you remember when you think of a Lee Montfort. I can hear his voice, make it strong so that people go, I know what Nestor Aparicio is about. I don't care whether they like you or don't like you. They know who you are. They know who you are. The worst thing about a columnist is when someone says, I have no idea who that guy is.
Wishy-washy.
Yeah, that's right. I have no idea who that guy is.
Clark Judge is here. He wrote a great column. It's giving me a little food for thought here about the football season. Let's get on to the season and where it is, and the money and the streaming and all of this stuff. Is it still as compelling to you as it's ever been? Because I went to the Super Bowl. It's compelling to so many people for so many reasons, not just fantasy sports, which we all talked about for 20 years. The gambling part of this, and how dawn it is for the beginning of wherever they're going. And that includes baseball, and they're getting rid of starting pitching was the only reason people bet on it, right? But football and the betting season in our state now, we have casinos open, we have sports wagering. I talk about it all the time with our friends from the Maryland Lottery. They're really dancing with a different thing here than I love Baltimore. I love the Ravens. I love the city. I love provincialism. I want my team, our region, our area, that all the stuff that John Stedman fell in love with, the collegiate part of that for the Baltimore Colts, for our parents and our grandparents. They've really danced with this gambling thing in a way that Calvin Ridley and what, but I don't know where the end. I think they're going into a black hole with this, that they see a lot of money, but I don't know that this is good. I think they're getting away from the core of what they do with this.
Nestor, I'm with you 100%. And before I get going on this, I'm glad you mentioned Steady, because John Stedman was a great friend of mine. And when I mentioned great columnist, I should have mentioned John Stedman. He was a great columnist and a wonderful man. But I agree with you 100%. I was talking about the eye test for two that I do with Eric Hoffman. We had Paul Tagliabue on, and we talked to him about gambling, and he thinks the NFL is going right down the wrong hole. And he's very much against it. He was very much against putting a team in Las Vegas. That's for another conversation. But I agree with you 100%. I think this is dancing with the devil. And again, it's because probably, and almost assuredly, I'm old school. I worry about the dangers there. You mentioned Calvin Ridley. I think he said what he bet like $1,500 or whatever on football. You kidding me? You think that's what he bet? I don't believe that. I mean, but I'm cynical about it. And I think what you talked about probably is a romanticism that's gone from all of sports. And you've got businessmen who are saying we need to make as much money as quickly as possible, because it may be that this sport one day becomes something like racing and boxing. When I was a kid, my dad said the most popular sports when he was a kid, you remember, were horse racing and boxing. And they just sort of went off the tracks, and they're still there, but they're really not the.
Well, you've watched baseball deteriorate. I mean, did you really watch the All-Star game 2 weeks ago the way you did in 1978?
And I love baseball. That's my favorite sport. Baseball is my favorite sport. I love it. Played it. I love it. And I just don't know what they're doing.
It's sort of left us, right? Like I don't.
Their own worst enemy. They're their own worst enemy. Let's make larger bases. Yeah, that's a good idea. Make larger bases. A pitch clock. Yeah, that's a good idea. Starters that go 5 innings. Sure, that's good. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. Well,
the shift as well. Fundamentally, Clark Judge is here. In addition to this, we watch the games. We like the games.
Yeah.
The Joe Burrow story.
Yep.
Great. Seeing teams get better. Trying to see this franchise here fix itself after I mean, Harbaugh was almost embarrassed in the end of it with the injuries and saying, we should have been better. We could have been better. Now they put the thing back together. The left tackle's injured. They're waiting on cornerbacks. They're waiting on running backs. Their quarterback, they have a contract maybe thing with him.
Yep.
This is why Harbaugh makes the big bucks and he's hanging around 15 years into this, is getting everybody there focused on the Jets on September 11th. And now the longer season, the sport compels it's the only big thing that's left. And the buildup for it is 8 months of us waiting to say, all right, we're going to play. Now we got a month of preseason games.
Yeah, no, that's right. But, it's funny when you talked earlier about gambling. I remember years ago when I was covering the Chargers in San Diego, Nick Canepa was a good friend of mine and a columnist for the Union Tribune. He said, you know why the NFL is so popular? I said, yeah, great sport. He goes, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's gambling. It's gambling. And he was absolutely right. And now you look at what's going on. The NFL finally said, yeah, we need to embrace it, when commissioners prior to Roger Goodell did not. We need to embrace this thing. And it's driven in part, or in large part, by fantasy football. People love playing it. And I understand why. I mean, I played it years ago. I thought that was good. It's great because you're your own GM. But it's driven by all of that. And I think the other sports are to some extent too. But that is what's going on here. And I think they're gambling. Well, you use that sort of loosely, but the owners are taking a chance here by saying, listen, we're going to embrace this thing. The Nestor Apparisas and Clark Judges of the world, they're yesterday's news. We don't care about them. We care about the young guys, the 25 to 40-year-old people. Let's see how much money they're going to spend, that core audience, and get them energized. And so they're looking at all these different platforms. Listen, I can't watch the Yankees on Friday night because they're on Amazon Prime. Can't watch any Friday night game. So we got Amazon Prime to watch the Yankees. Well, somebody's getting money out of that. And I would think the Yankees and Amazon and the Major League Baseball is. And so all that ends up making you, I think, just that much more sort of cynical and less romantic about it. When we opened this conversation with you talking about what I was involved with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I love those players and that era. I loved watching them. I loved covering them. And I love what they did. And Burt Jones is a great example. But it's a whole different game now. It's a whole different game. And so when you talk to people today about some of those players, I talked to a guy that I'm not going to mention his name, but was a borderline Hall of Fame running back. And we were talking about Paul Warfield. And in some point of the conversation, he was talking about Terrell Owens. And I mentioned that I did not support Terrell Owens for the Hall of Fame. And, he's one of the 2 or 3 greatest receivers in pro football history. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I mean, he said, well, where would you go? I said, I'd start with Don Hudson, and then Jerry Rice, Lance. And you watch Lance Allworth, my great receivers, Paul Warfield. He said, stop right there. Paul Warfield. Have you seen his numbers? I said, yeah, I've seen his numbers and I saw him play. He was a great, great receiver. But these people who are driven by numbers, and that takes us to baseball, analytics. I don't care. Baseball's a simple game. Very simple game that people are trying to complicate. But anyway.
Well, Warfield moved into an offense and they didn't throw the football so he could win championships.
Because they had Jim Kick and Larry Zonka, right? And Brian Greasy. Bob Greasy threw it, 14 times in a game and in the Super Bowl. So anyway, that's right. But they don't know that. They look at the numbers. That's all.
Well, where we are now is we have a young man here that we drafted in the first round that actually knew the quarterback. They bunkied around. He asked off the franchise. Antonio Brown's cousin, I should say, Hollywood, asked out of the franchise because he's not getting the ball enough. Well, this offense is never going to pass. I mean, that's part of the conundrum with all of this with Lamar. He's one of one, comparing him to other people, getting wide receivers happy and all that.
Right.
I mean, Terrell Owens would never play in this franchise because they don't throw the ball enough, right?
He wouldn't. I mean, I will say this. Listen, the guy was unanimous MVP. That counts for a lot. But again, I look at trends and I look at his last 2 or 3 years and they're going in the wrong direction. So in terms of business deal, that's a hard decision to make. Because if you're not going to get him the number he's looking for, and I guess isn't his mother his agent? I mean, that sort of helps, I would think, the team in one respect, because if you have an agent, he's playing the media. He's playing the media for a lot more money. But in any case, if he's not getting the numbers he wants, he's going somewhere else. And you say, well, they're going to franchise. Not going to franchise. I'm going to get $47 million, as a franchise player. So what happens? What's your next alternative? You don't have one. So at some point, you're going to have to give him what he wants because he's got leverage. But that's the thing that drives me nuts, Nestor, is when people talk about greatness today, and they measure greatness in terms of numbers. And again, I will go back to a game where it was in, I don't know, 2011 or so, Vince Young, or 2012, I guess. Vince Young was playing for Philadelphia, and it's playing against the Patriots, and the Patriots destroyed him. Forgotten what the score was, but it was just, like 45-20 or something. Vince Young threw for 400 yards in that game. And I had a guy tell me he had a great game because he had him on his fantasy football team. What a great game he had. And I said, if you had been in that game, you would never say that, because the Patriots got up by 4 or 5 touchdowns early. And what does New England do in those situations? They let you go up and down the field. They don't care if you score. He piled up numbers. So to the casual observer or the fantasy football player, it's a great day. He was awful. He was awful, but he completed a lot of passes where they said, yeah, let the clock run, and he ran up 400 yards, but they lost by a ton of points. One of the reasons was he wasn't very good.
Clark Judge is here. He's very good and covering the National Football League and getting ready for the season and all stuff. I want to end this with our rock and roll thing and our Jim Irsay thing. And people have hung out this long. I went to New York. I've gotten to know Jim over the last 15 years, and Pete Ward and people from his staff and lots of people that worked in Indianapolis in the front office and friends there when they won the Super Bowl, and Tony Dungy and all of that good stuff, right? Chuck Pagano, all the way through, right? Yep. So Jim invites me up to New York because I was chasing it around, and I'll say this: it was nice to see Hunter S. Thompson's car and to see the marijuana butts put out on the white leather seats, and it was cool seeing on the road. It was cool seeing all the guitars and all of that stuff. I had no idea how, and I'm a music guy in general, that I didn't go there thinking, oh my God, Mike Mills is going to sing Superman and Don't Go Back to Rockville. Oh my God, Natalie Merchant's going to sing, 4 10,000 Maniacs song. Oh my God, Kenny Wayne Shepherd's going to slay it. Oh my God, this is Tom Petty's band, and I'm hanging out having beers with the other guys in the band who aren't up there. It was such a great concert. Like when people, I've been to thousands of concerts, and what's the best this? And I mean, I've seen the Stones on the beach with 1 million people in Copacabana. I've just seen so many concerts. Memorable's hard for me in the concert world, right? I've seen Bruce 100 times. They're all memorable, but the thing we did in New York there was really weirdly memorable for me because I sort of stumbled into something I wasn't expecting to totally geek out, rush the stage hearing REM songs. I just wasn't. Until they started playing it, I'd never even considered why I was going there. I was going to see Robert Plant on Saturday night originally.
I
remember. I went up.
But
yeah. I was expecting to have a good time, see some cool stuff, chat with some interesting people, look nice, be in New York, get some good food, whatever. It was a much more memorable experience than that.
No question about it. I did know that they were going to play. I didn't know they were going to play that long. I knew Natalie Merchant was going to appear, but I thought she was going to play 2 or 3 songs. I think she sang 8 songs or so. She wasn't too happy with the response to the first one, as we recall, because she thought that people should be quiet.
They always, the cocktail parties are terrible.
That's
terrible,
right? Right. You're right. I think if you remember one of the Super Bowls in Arizona, Jim Blossoms were there, and it might have been that 2007 Super Bowl, the Patriots. But in any case, the Jim Blossoms were playing on a Tuesday night party. Same sort of thing. It was like this huge outdoor cocktail party, and they went, "Hey, what's going on here? What's going on is it's Tuesday night. This is not a cocktail party, basically outdoors. We love listening to you, but that's what it is. This isn't a concert.
It's more of a high school dance.
More of a high school dance is right. And if you don't get it, I'm sorry, but you're getting money to be here. And I love listening to Natalie Merchant. You're right. Don't Go Back to Rockville. When I heard that, I was standing next to Pete Ward, and I said, I love this song. He goes, I do too. It's a great song.
It was like a gift to me. I never expected to sound that good, feel that good. And I was like, oh man, rock and roll gets my soul, man.
Well, yeah. And the thing that I love though, that whole show was I was running into people I'd never met before and finding that I ran into some extremely intriguing individuals. When I went over to that wall of guitars, right? You remember that. It was like 15, 20 guitars, and they've got listed. I looked up there and I had my nephew with me, whom you met. And I said, oh, that's interesting. They got Pete Townshend's name spelled wrong. And he said, really? I said, yeah, there should be an H in there, like Townshend, but it's Townsend. And the guy who was standing there said, you're absolutely right. And I said, I'm sorry, what? He goes, you're absolutely right. They screwed up on that. They also screwed up on identifying this guitar. They identified it wrong. And so then we started talking, and we had a 15 to 20-minute conversation where he was asking about the bands that I knew, what I'd seen, and we were talking about the Who and English rock and Todd Rundgren, and just I love listening. And this guy was so informative, and he was plugged into everything, and he was sort of responsible for that wall. And he said, I told him about that, but they didn't really care. So he gave me his card. What a great guy. I mean, I'd never met him before. I'd never been before.
I ran into a woman in
I saw-
line, and I had a +1, and I got her in because her name. She was from Atlantic Records. She was the person that put me on the phone with Jimmy Page back in 1985.
Remember the black and white remember the black and white photo she had?
Oh, it
Remember
was
the black and white-
unbelievable.
she was unreal. And you
It was
told me
like
about her.
Pamela DeBar's files.
That's right. That's actually right. And she's showing pictures of Led Zeppelin. She was talking about putting you in touch with Jimmy Page. I went, you got to be kidding me. And I did say to her, she goes, well, who do you like? I said, well, you've heard him, but you don't know much about him. Todd Rundgren. She goes, kidding me? I wrote a thesis on Todd Rundgren. I wrote a thesis. She knew everything. I love meeting her. She was great.
Oh, and I didn't see Rundgren this time around with Hall. I know you saw it in Philly. My wife and I were just worn out. It was down at National Harbor.
Yeah.
We live north of the city now. We were just worn out that night. I wanted to go. I watched lots of videos online, so I knew what they were doing in the Philly groove and all that stuff. Right. But then Todd came out and did that Beatles thing with Christopher Cross, right? Was it good?
Right. Oh, it was great. It's better than good. It's fabulous. He did one 2 years ago.
Revolver and Rubber Soul. What did they do? Something like that?
He did Revolver and Rubber Soul. And then 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, he did the White Album with basically the same lineup. And yeah, Christopher Cross, he had the last remaining Joey, just drawing his last name, forgot his last remaining member of Badfinger, one of the greatest bands that's overlooked, one of those underrated bands of all time, Joey Molland, I think his name is. And he was great because he did Baby Blue and a couple others. And that the bands were it was such a together group. It's a great show. And as I said, the show 2 years ago when they had Mickey Dolenz with them, but this time they had Denny Lane. Denny Lane was great. And when, hey, the guy's going to do Go Now, guaranteed he's going to do Go Now. And the guy said, well, the Moody Blues did that. I said, that's Denny Lane. He went, oh, I thought he was with Wings. I said he was, but before he was with Wings, he was with the Moody Blues. And it's just a fabulous show. I mean, I had the greatest time. Took my wife to it 2 years ago. She was ambivalent. She said, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. And Todd Rundgren put it together.
I need to get together with Todd Rundgren. I have people that know him and drink wine with him and stuff like that. And he's probably the coolest guy in the history of rock and roll, right?
He's a genius. He really is. And I don't use that word liberally. He's a genius. I mean, the records he's produced, the stuff he's done with Microsoft and Apple, and what he's done for himself, the records, Utopia, and just the litany of really good material and songs that he's produced, but also the bands that he's produced. It's just astounding to me. It took the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame decades to wake up to him. When Hall & Oates were introduced, Daryl Hall going, where's Todd Rundgren? He should be in before. What are we doing here? Yeah, let's put in Janet Jackson ahead of Todd Rundgren. Yeah.
Oh, God. I was at the Janet Jackson induction night up in New York. So the only one I went to, I got Def Leppard and Ian Hunter singing off pitch at 1:30 in the morning, hammered. Were you at that one?
No, but Ian Hunter is one of my all-time heroes. I used to go see Mott when they were banging around in the early 70s. I got the Hoople t-shirt here.
Listen to me. Whatever you do, do not Google Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all the young dudes, Def Leppard, and don't watch it.
Okay.
It's it's kind of like watching Johnny U in San Diego. You just don't need to see it again, right?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold on for. No, it's downstairs. I've got something for Ian Hunter. But
next
anyway,
time.
When I was in a bar in New York, when we lived there from 2000 to 2015. It was Kennedy's, which has since closed. But I'm coming out of Kennedy's, and there sitting in the waiting room is Ian Hunter. He's waiting to get seated. And I just said to my wife, that's Ian Hunter. She goes, who? I said, lead singer, because this guy's a legend. And I just saw him, and he looked up and went, rock on, Ian. And just kept like, he goes, hey, good to see you, mate. Good to see you. It's great.
He did a thing with, was it Mick Taylor? He did a thing at Hammerjacks many, Mick Ronson, maybe a million years ago.
He and Mick Ronson played together. I saw Mick.
It was he and Ronson in the 80s at Hammerjacks. I interviewed.
Sure. That's right. I
interviewed Ronson, as I remember it.
Mick Ronson's a great guitar player. He was the Spiders from Mars, he's a great guitar player. But he and Ian Hunter toured, and they did some great stuff. I saw them out at the Belly Up in San Diego several times. They were wonderful. Ian Hunter's one of the most underappreciated personalities and singers in rock and roll history.
I'll take Bowie over all of them, but that's okay.
Oh, I
Rundgren would take Bowie
Bowie.
too.
Yeah, I
Rundgren
love
would take
Bowie too.
Bowie.
Yeah, I love Bowie. I love Bowie. I mean, I got onto him with Hunky Dory, and then to me, Ziggy Stardust is just otherworldly. I love it. Anyway.
Ziggy plays guitar. Clark Judge plays the NFL. You can find him out on the interwebs, on his Twitter. He is regrouped. Maybe you and I are going to do columns together.
I think that's where we're headed. I think we're going in that direction.
Man, anybody hanging out with Kaufman's having better days than me. So you give Ira my love.
I will.
Tell him Nestor said hello. All right. Make sure you tell him.
That's
all right.
Thanks,
I love
always
Ira.
a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you
Clark
so much.
Judge, always of Baltimore. They're just renting him in Connecticut right now, but the Montreal Canadiens have him for life. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570. Towson. What are you doing? You're holding your Canadian thing up. Hey, I'm going to Montreal to see Pearl Jam in a couple weeks. I'm going to need a restaurant recommendation there. Send me to Tokyo or something like that. We are WNST, AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore positive.